tonicity, very important concept that involves osmosis. So we have hypotonic, we have isotonic state, and we have hypertonic state. So I'm going to use this. So this is the isotonic. This would be hypertonic. And this would be hypotonic. What is the tonicity? Concentration of solutes in the solution. That's it. Remember that. In the solution. Memorize that. Concentration of solutes in the solution. What does it mean? Here is your solution. Here's the cell. Here's the cell. And here's the cell. Let's say, for the sake of this example, concentration of solutes in the cell never changes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Identical number of solutes within the cell. But outside of the cell, here, here, and here, concentration may change. It will change. And let's say it's a blood, right? You take a red blood cell and you put it in the system, in the circulatory system. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 7. So this bubbles inside never changes, right? So, but the tonicity definition states that concentration of solute in the solution. So the outside of the cell. Solution is outside of the cell. In isotonic solution, concentration of solutes compared to what's inside of the cell is the same. Always compare to what's inside of the cell. Concentration of solutes inside of the cell is the same as the concentration of solutes in the solution. That's an isotonic state. Hypertonic, hyper, more. So then concentration of solute in the solution compared to the cell is more. Hypertonic state. Because tonicity, concentration number of solutes in a solution. Concentration of solutes in the solution. You see here is a concentration of solutes in the solution, which is outside of the cell, is greater to what's inside. It's a hypertonic state. In this case, it's hypotonic. Concentration of solutes in the solution less to what's inside of the cell. And that relates to how the water will be moving. In osmosis, water goes towards highest concentration gradient of a solute. Here, water, and just this is the semi-permeable membrane, so only water can pass through, molecules cannot. So here, water will disperse equally because water goes towards highest concentration gradient of a solute. Number of solutes in the solution, that's what this tonicity. Osmosis states that the water moves towards highest concentration gradient of a solute. Solute where? In the solution. In hypertonic, there's more solutes in the solution compared to what's inside of the cell, so the water will leave the cell and will go towards the solutes in the solution. Hypertonic. Here's more solutes, so the water will go towards high concentration, and the cell will crescent, will lose water, it will die. Water moves towards highest concentration gradient of the solute. Where there's the highest concentration gradient of a solute? Here, inside of the cell. So the water will enter the cell. The water will enter the cell because there's less of solutes, and water goes towards high concentration. In this case, compared to what's outside of the cell, right? In this case, there's more solids inside of the cell, and there's less, and we just defined that for the sake of this class. The solutes inside of the cell never change, it stays constant, but what's outside cell in the solution changes. So the water will enter, and it will swell, burst, lyse, it will die. Here, water does not go anywhere, it will be equally dispersed. So the tonicity is the concentration of solutes in the solution, and the law of osmosis states that the movement of water goes towards highest concentration gradient of a solute. Where do we have higher concentration gradient of a solid? Here, inside of the cell, compared to what's outside. And here we have a greater concentration of solids outside of the cell compared to what's inside. Osmolarity is expressed in osmoles per liter. Osmolarity is equal to molarity. Example, right, so that you can skip. It's not that important. Tonicity is crazy important. So now we can go to this thing. Hydrostatic pressure. Pressure that is exerted on the wall, let's say it's a blood vessel, or the cell. So the pressure that is exerted on the wall of the blood vessel or on the cell, right? Osmotic pressure. Osmotic pressure. If you know what osmosis is, so then it's very easy to talk about osmotic pressure. The pressure, osmotic pressure. So you can say intravascular osmotic pressure inside of the blood vessels, intracellular pressure, pressure inside of the cell. What is osmosis? Movement of water towards highest concentration gradient of a solid. When you say that you have a high cellular osmotic pressure, it means that in the environment you have less solutes compared to what you have inside. You have high osmotic pressure cellular, high cellular osmotic pressure, meaning that the water would be moving towards the cell. It means that in the solution you have less concentration of the solids. If you have high intravascular inside of the blood vessels, high intravascular pressure, it means that inside of the blood vessels you have more solutes compared to what you have outside of the blood vessel. There are three important spaces: intravascular space, intracellular space, let's actually say fluid, right? Intravascular fluid, intracellular fluid, and extracellular fluid or interstitial fluid or space. You have a blood vessel, you have a cell, and you have a space in between the blood and between the cell. That's what it's called, interstitial, in between, interstate. You go from one state to another state. So interstitial space between blood vessels and between the cell. In between, interstitial space. Intracellular fluid or space, intravascular fluid or space, and interstitial fluid or space. So when we say high osmotic pressure, intravascular high osmotic pressure, intravascular, it means that there is the highest concentration of solids inside of the blood compared to what's outside of the blood vessel. What's outside of the blood vessel? There's interstitial space. Why is it important? When you eat food, the nutrients and oxygen, right? Oxygen also get inside of the blood vessels and nutrients. they must get to the cell. And cell is here. So when the nutrient and oxygen leaves the blood vessels and needs to enter the cell, they have to cross interstitial space. It's like you need to go from this room to another room. This room is a cell, another room is a cell, and the corridor is your interstitial space. So for the nutrients and oxygen to get inside of the space, you have to cross the space and get into the cell. Same way when the cell is producing carbon dioxide and waste, you need to go back into the blood vessel so you can remove that from your system. You also have to cross this interstitial space. Inside of the blood vessels we have water, inside of the cell we have water, and inside of the interstitial space we also have water. And that has to be balanced, must be balanced. And it's all balanced by the laws of osmosis, passive transport, active transport, diffusion, which is passive transport. It's all being balanced by those molecules moving from place to place. And the water is attracted towards highest concentration gradient of the solute. When you eat processed foods has a lot of sodium. You keep sodium, you keep water. Wherever the sodium goes, water will follow. Water will go towards highest concentration gradient of the solute. If you consume too much of processed foods, you keep sodium. Sodium will keep water. Water will go towards highest concentration gradient of solute. Sodium is a solute. Solute is a particle. You release sodium, you release water. This concept is important. So there's three spaces: interstitial, intravascular, and intracellular. Osmotic pressure. Water will be pulled into a cell with higher osmolarity, concentration of solutes in the solution. So high intravascular pressure, meaning here you have more solutes and here you have less solutes. So the water will go towards highest concentration gradient of the solutes. High intracellular pressure, meaning cells will have higher concentration gradient of solids compared to what's outside. So the water will enter. High interstitial pressure, water will leave the cell and water will leave the blood vessels and go towards highest concentration gradient of the solids that is in between cells and in between blood. Hydrostatic pressure, pressure exerted on the wall of the vessel or the cell. The more solids inside of the cell, the bigger the pull. So osmosis is the pull, water being pulled towards highest concentration gradient of the solids. I'm constantly repeating those terminologies like a broken machine, non-stop, 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 on purpose. So the more solids inside of the cell, the bigger the pull on the water to enter, resulting in a bigger or higher osmotic pressure inside of the cell. So high osmotic pressure in the vascular system or in the cellular system, meaning that there's a highest concentration gradient of those solids inside of those compartments.